Ladies and gentlemen, Simmons is dying, and dead. So, Warrior Within was well received, but poorly looked upon. The dramatic shift in tone did not sit well, and the glitchy gameplay disappointed our audience. Now, I don't know about you, but we are not known for endless shitty sequels.
Harbord.
This time, we need to get back to the basics. Carolyn, what have you got?
Well, sir, why not, like you said, go back to basics? We could return to the light-hearted nature, the vibrant colors, and platforming adventure style of the first. We already showed that Fair would be coming back. Why don't we simply expand upon the first? Do sequels like they're supposed to be. More, but better?
I am going to fuck your mouth.
Sir, I'm sorry, I just thought...
No, that's a good thing. It means I'm not going to disembowel you.
Hooray?
Hooray, indeed. So where do you go when you need to make a sequel that recaptures the original but you can't regress the gameplay? You make a mixture of the two. Two Thrones gives us the combat style of Warrior Within, while moving back to the Disney-esque adventure that Sands of Time captured. Vibrant colors, a drawn-out adventure over contained exploration, sarcasm, you know the drill at this point. Sands of Time was hugely popular, and taking the advanced combat of its successor can only improve the formula. So the question is, did it work? No, it did not. Being the worst received of the bunch, which isn't saying much considering its praise, the game comes out of the gate pretty sorely. It starts almost where Warrior Within left off, on the boat with Kylina, just ahead enough to where he's coming home. Babylon is under attack, boat gets wrecked, Kylina gets separated, adventure begins. It starts us off introducing the first new mechanic of the game, stealth kills. You want to know where shitty tacked-on stealth came from? You can probably thank this game. So we make our way through Babylon, trying to catch up to our newly tacked-on love interest when we finally make it to... I don't know, is this a palace? It's not the palace, but is it a palace? Anyway, we find out that thanks to making sure the Sands of Time were never created, never traveled to India, and the events of Sands of Time never occurred, as exemplified when the Vizier shows up.
Ah, you must be the Prince of Persia.
He did the thing. He did the thing! He did the thing! Roll credits! So the Vizier kills Kylina, creates the Sands of Time, we get slightly infected by them, and then the game creates a contrivance to separate us so we can continue playing. The general combat is mostly the same, only they've somehow made it worse. Button reading has become worthless, as it will sometimes read XXY as XXXX, making combos a chore even when you aren't missing, having enemies strike through your combos, or block literally all of it. Enemy AI is the most untenable it has ever been. They will block full combos, charge from across the screen to hit you in the middle of a counterattack, and all of that is when they simply aren't hitting you through your block. Boss battles are the worst. The first is just a shitty dodge fest while you go through the attack prompts for stealth kills, then have to saw away at his feet. The second is just chasing the Elephant Man back and forth. The third is a garbage mess that gives you no indication of how to complete it, and the fight with the Vizier is actually not that bad. The third boss fight is easily the worst, as you have to deal with the insanely poor combat mechanics, while having to divine that you have to attack one guy, and then when this guy attacks, dodge and then hit him. However, the locking on mechanics can have you dodge right into him, interrupting the process, or, even if it doesn't, having to work your way around to the other asshole who is trying to stab at you through him. It's a flat-out mess, and it doesn't get any better when we're introduced to the result of our sand infection, the Dark Prince. He's a manifestation of the prince's former desire for combat and glory that looks like Seal became Super Saiyan. He's made of sand, so for some reason the prince is constantly dying and can only be healed from collecting sand. Water drives him away, and he talks to the prince. That's all there is to it, so you can fuck off now. No, honestly, what isn't just trying to capture the first game with the second game sprinkled in is totally unmemorable. Platforming offers little new, just slots to hook your dagger into and windows that launch you for some reason. They recycle the giant fight and you use it to crash through walls. Enemies are slightly more difficult copy-paste with very few new ones again. And the whole of the game's world is entirely unmemorable. They even brought back Old Man Withers! Hooray! As I said before, it goes back to the grand adventure style, so rather than exploring a palace, we're making our way through Babylon. And when it's not slightly sandy off-white buildings, it's heavily sandy off-white buildings with a couple sewer sections sprinkled in. Sound familiar? I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a beautiful and fantastically made world, but it has no identity of its own. There aren't any memorable segments except maybe climbing the Tower of Babylon when suddenly fucking tree! What also doesn't help is a severely underwhelming soundtrack. Sands of Time had a heavily stylistic soundtrack that played off the mood of the segments of the game. The music helped define the segments, and Warrior Within was just the same. Constant heavy metal riffs, as tiresome as they could be, at least changed with the segments, and drove the combat with heavy tones and high beats per minute. Two Thrones' soundtrack is all style, that's it. They present some music that could be seen as vaguely Arabic in style, but it has no real tone at best, and is genuinely annoying at worst. And speaking of terrible audio, bad sound mixing is back. Music just cues outside of combat and plays over dialogue. Going back to the narration of Sands of Time, we have Kylina trying to tell the story, but she's so whispery and monotone that half the time you can't hear her, especially when the prince is talking over her. It's like everything bad about Warrior Within was pasted over some cheap knockoff of Sands of Time. It's hellish. When we get past audio mixing that is the worst it's been for the series, the platforming and stealth gameplay mixture is just flat out boring. It doesn't do anything new with what it has, and even the new moves just add unnecessary flash to the platforming. Seriously, wasn't this done in Sonic Adventure? Health upgrades make a return, but they don't add to a secondary ending. I don't know if this was out of laziness or the story, but the game focuses on the prince having to accept the consequences of his actions, so I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And of course, Farah is back. They have their snotty back and forths which create a situation where the prince is all grim and serious and then immediately goes into snarky remarks. It's a tonal whiplash that makes the game kind of tedious to play. Manufactured drama happens, but Farah forgives you. You get another elevator scene, find out Daddy's dead, and kill the God Emperor Vizier. All seems well, but we get one last tacked on piece of melodrama. The Dark Prince somehow manifests, and we defeat his evil ass with the power of being the bigger man and walking away. Oh look, it's the titular Two Thrones. Aren't they nice? The game ends how the first begins, with the prince telling a story to Farah, which follows the obvious Arabian Nights theme, and that's it. Game over. If this diatribe seems a bit rushed, it's because the game feels rushed. They push you really hard through all the paces they can in an attempt to recapture the charge of Sands of Time, and it just feels manufactured. They try to add drama with the Dark Prince, but it feels manufactured. And that's the word of the day. Manufactured. It doesn't feel like I'm playing a game from the same series. It feels like I'm playing a checkbox designed to make a quick buck. And I'm not sure when Ubisoft started doing it, but it really feels like they may have started it with this game. It's lifeless, with far more bugs and bad models than the series has ever had, and what follows is exactly what we've come to expect from Ubisoft. They've attempted to recapture the magic twice now, and both times they've been obvious piss-poor cash-ins. They've been hinting at creating another Prince of Persia title, but I have no interest or love for the company anymore. This game is a mess. Unmemorable with no soul, and it pretty much describes Ubisoft in a nutshell. Assassin's Creed was originally supposed to be a Prince of Persia spin-off / sequel, but they had the decency to let the franchise sleep a while and then did what Ubisoft does. It's nearly heartbreaking to think that having loved the first two games so much created the endless cycle of recycling the same games until nothing is left trend. Is Two Thrones an inherently bad game? No! Its design is competent enough, and unless you die, you're never going to see a loading screen. Seriously, this game is part of a technological marvel of its time, and one of the greatest things it brought to the table went completely overlooked because it's so good at its job that you forget it even needs to do its job. It's just boring and uninspired, and is the spearhead of all the worst trends of the industry. And that hurts to say. The trilogy sits as a microcosm of AAA development. Studios try something new, people love the new thing. Studio expands upon and makes a sequel, people love the sequel. Studio makes another sequel, this time expanding on nothing and rushing out piece after piece in an attempt to capture the buck they did with the first installment. They create something with all the life it could possibly have and then squeeze the life out of it. It's all they've done for the past decade now, and it's all they'll ever do in the future. It's time to let companies like Ubisoft die out. Carolyn, oh sweet Carolyn. Should have suppressed your gag reflex. Oh well. I wonder if we can make all the money.
Drowning crowds and drowning rain.